Steve, thanks for joining us today at Adapt CIO Edge here in Melbourne. It's lovely to be back down in Melbourne again. Today's theme is leading modernisation and measuring value. When you think about your role, what does that entail?
Currently as Chief Digital Officer of Victoria Police for the last 3 weeks. So I'm new into a very large CIO role. I've been 7 years previously in the Department of Health and Human Services in Victoria. So I'll talk mainly about my experiences there. And the core concept of value in a digital innovation role from my perspective is best seen through the idea of cadence and digital fitness. So these days, it's virtually impossible to accurately predict or even really know what an organisation needs in the way of digital solutions, because it is so dynamic and virtually every part of the organisation requires digitisation in one form or another. So the most important thing for a CIO to be able to do, in my view, to create value, is to be able to articulate how the organisation will increase its digital fitness and increase the cadence of its capacity to deliver digital solutions to a high cadence with whatever money is available to have the maximum beneficial effect in the organisation.
Mm-hmm. And I like that theme of digital fitness because it touches on so many other related areas that not only is the CIO and the CDO responsible for, but also those other stakeholders in the organisation, such as the Chief HR Officer, for example. Mm-hmm. And when we think about that technology change, technology is not the saviour, it's just an enabler.
Yes.
So the question really then becomes, how do we help our people to learn rapidly, but not only learn, to then apply that learning into the way that they're operating to create those new pieces of value? When you think about encouraging and guiding that digital fitness in your people, what are some of the measurements? What are some of the concepts that really work well?
Yeah. So the core concept, sometimes I do silly plays on words. So if you think about strategy with a capital S, sometimes it'll be misspelled as strategy, which is a kind of malapropism, but actually it's the best thing. So my experience is the best strategy is to get started. And that's something that really appeals to people as an idea, because rather than endlessly thinking about things and developing big strategies and PowerPoint slides and documents, the most important thing to get people started on a journey of digital transformation is to get started. Strategy actually is a strategy in its own right.
Yes.
And once you get started, one thing leads to another. And the reason that's important is I sometimes talk about the idea of compounding organisational learning. So we all learned in primary school that you should put $1 in your bank account a month rather than $12 in at the end of the year because of compounding interest. The same thing applies to digital transformation. The most important thing is to get started and then to deliver a high cadence portfolio of solutions iteratively and rapidly over time. And then you're taking everybody through a whole series of learning journeys rather than one big journey over 3 years or something like that. And then you see people starting to lean in because they're part of it, they can see results, they feel like they're getting places, they're learning what works and what doesn't, and they're adapting the journey as they go. Energy kind of rises quickly.
IT strategy, I really like that phrase, and it sort of makes me think, you know, as we try and start and evolve and get better at our data journey, I think about what some of our customers are telling us at the moment, because 81% of Australian organisations are only at the midpoint of their data strategy today. And thinking about getting started, but also linking it back to the vision for how you make that progress and why? How do those things connect? And what have been some of the challenges you've had to deal with along the way?
Yeah, okay, well, so when it comes to data, then data is produced by applications in the main. And for the organisations that I've been working in, they're underinvested in their core systems. So a lot of the data problems stem from the fact that the data is not even digitised in the first place. And if it is, it's been created by a series of disconnected applications and it's not being curated well. So you have a kind of fragmented mismatch of data in the organisation. So making progress on that, in old school terms, it used to be about a data warehouse and a big long-term program of cleaning data and all of that. The only way to deal with that sensibly these days is to first create a sensible place to store data. In the Department of Health and Human Services, we created a thing called the Common Data Layer, a Microsoft Azure-based data repository, and a series of custodial arrangements, strategies around clarifying meaning of data definitions and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then every new application that's built has somewhere sensible to store data and some rules about it. And every new application that's built incrementally improves the availability of data, the digitisation of data, and the quality of data. And over time, things get better. But the core thing is, unless you can accelerate the rate at which you generate new digital applications, you'll never make any progress on the data anyway, because too much of it is old in the sense of the way it's created, or not digital in the first place. So it still comes back to, I think, the core thing of both fixing data and fixing the transformative journey of the organisation all revolves around the cadence of your ability to generate new applications.
Yeah, and it comes back to that cadence again, and it's aligning with the vision, it's aligning with the strategy, as you've said. But it also seems like, and we hear from customers that conflicting business priorities is still their number one challenge, and that's perennial, it seems. But at the same time, when we look at the business priority to build the data-driven organisation, and we ask CFOs and we ask CIOs and we ask CDOs, they're pretty much aligned on wanting to drive that kind of priority. So it almost seems like it's a language issue, it's a cultural understanding issue. And as you've gone about building these data layers and improving the cadence, digitising as you go along, what have been some of the things that have really worked to help bring those perspectives around the table?
Yeah, okay. So getting started on the journey is always the hardest thing. And many organisations have an approach to driving IT activity generally, which essentially is founded on the idea of a small number of large, big bets. So big investment programs, transformation journeys with a capital D and a capital T, digital transformation and a big PowerPoint deck. And that's wonderful, but it's not aligned to agile ways of going about things, and it's not aligned to a complex prioritization problem in organizations, because you have to make too many big bets. And certainly in the organizations that I've worked in, making big bets which take a long time to deliver and cost a lot of money is very high risk because the environment is too dynamic. So how to get moving means you've got to be able to get money in relatively small amounts and think of it as part of a dynamic investment portfolio. And you've got to be able to mobilize projects quite quickly without going through onerous procurement processes. You've got to be able to invest in platform capabilities and reusable assets so that as the journey goes on, more and more and more of what you need is pre-existing and reusable. And you've got to be able to deliver agile projects on top of that kind of platform layer, and do all that to a high cadence. So getting started is the problem.
Yeah.
That's why strategy is important, because a lot of organisations cannot do that because they cannot get money in small, increments. They can only get money in big bet the farm increments, and only after spending 3 years developing a business case to do it. So there's a whole lot of layers which need to be assembled, and the only way to do it is to get started. And my learning is that in the start of this journey, there's a degree of skepticism about it because it feels a bit like just getting started with no plan. But actually, once people see it in action, they realise that it's a much, much lower risk, more dynamic way of going about things. And it cuts to the chase of the core problem of alignment. How do you align IT investment to business needs? Well, do it in smaller increments.
Absolutely.
And actually, the alignment occurs quite naturally.
Absolutely. And I think, I remember when I used to work in government, we were delivering application services on top of ERPs that were something like 40 years old at that time. And the high doc things you were talking about, that sort of that time to really build up organisational understanding, it was a lot of effort and often for not much change, really. So what I think we're really talking about is as you push the prioritisation of these projects back into the business to let them take those decisions about firstly resourcing, but actually what across the application portfolio is important for now and for why. But also when we ask CIOs and CFOs as well about how effective they feel they are in moving to becoming things like open, like modular, like agile, 62% of them say they're still not effective at those kinds of things. But it's a cultural change. It's a different way of working, and it's layering those different integrations, both in the delivery piece, but also operations and alignment as well. And as you think about this topic, if there was one thing you would want to leave with the ADAPT community, what would it be?
Look, I talk about this in the context of platform plus agile, and I use that as a capital P and an arithmetic plus and a capital A as one word to brand it, because the core idea in there is everybody wants to be agile, but you cannot be agile unless you have first started with platform thinking. So the platform thinking and platform capabilities are a prerequisite for agility at scale in large organisations. And the problem I have with, that I often see with organisations that are trying to be agile, but have not got embedded that platform thinking, which includes the ability to get money in small increments, the ability to reuse large market-leading cloud services platforms, the ability to have rigorous methodology-driven approaches to agile, the ability to staff and mobilise projects quickly, all of those things. Unless you have those things, then trying to be agile is a triumph of hope over experience and usually fails, and therefore leads to people saying agile is no good, we need to go back to procurement plus waterfall type methods. And one of the challenges is this cannot apply to everything. So you're not going to replace your Oracle financials core systems with a kind of agile give it a go approach. Some projects lend themselves to procurement plus waterfall type methods. That's the type of project, but not all. And therefore it's a matter of being very clear about where platform plus agile type ideas are appropriate, and they turn out to be appropriate in the things that the line of business folks care most about. The frontline systems, the back office kind of corporate systems, which they quite frankly don't care about as long as they work, are still really the preserve of more traditional approaches because they're such large scale, deeply embedded projects. So it's a question of starting in the right place and being focused and going where the love is.
Yeah.